There's a kind of silence money can't buy. It filled every inch of Le Pavone. A restaurant so exclusive that reservations were booked months in advance. Where chandeliers dripped like frozen stars from the ceiling and the air always carried the delicate scent of saffron and secrets. Tucked in the very heart of the city. This was the place where billionaires discussed deals quietly over truffle risotto and where the music didn't play, it floated. Wrapped in the soft elegance of a grand piano tucked behind a velvet curtain. Each table was its own little kingdom. Crystal glasses, gilded silverware, conversations that mattered, or at least pretended to. And in the shadowed back corner, behind a screen of orchids and flickering candlelight, sat a man who looked like he had everything except peace. John Maxwell, 48, widower, billionaire, tech mogul. A man whose name alone could shift markets. Whose schedule was often booked tighter than a Fortune 500 budget sheet. He wore a charcoal Armani suit like it was his second skin. His platinum watch ticking away the minutes of a life that, on the surface, seemed impeccably curated, but none of it, none of the elegance, wealth, or prestige, could mask the emptiness carved into him. He didn't see the restaurant anymore. Didn't hear the piano. Didn't notice the waiter who refilled his Bordeaux twice without being asked. His eyes stayed fixed on the untouched filet mignon in front of him. Perfectly seared and fragrant, but it might as well have been a pile of stones. Across from him sat an empty chair. It had been 10 years. A decade since the accident. Since his wife, Lillian, and their little boy, Caleb, just 3 years old, were taken in a flash of metal and shattered glass. 1 minute they were on their way to the park. The next, gone. Since then, John had become something like a ghost. He moved. Yes. He worked. He built companies, bought penthouses, attended galas, but he didn't live, not really. Silence became his routine, success became his armor, grief, his shadow. He raised the wine glass slowly, the red liquid swirling like a memory he wasn't ready to face. And just as it touched his lips, may I have your leftovers, sir? The voice was so quiet, so tremulous, that it almost got lost in the soft clinking of cutlery. But John heard it. More than that, it cut through him. He blinked, turned. Standing beside him was a girl. 19, maybe, blonde hair pulled into a messy bun that had given up hours ago. Her coat was threadbare, sleeves too short, and clung desperately to her slender frame against the early October chill. In her arms, a baby, maybe 7, 8 months old, wrapped tightly in a faded blanket. His big eyes locked on the plate of food like it was the sun. John stared. The room around them shifted. Conversations faltered. A waiter started toward them. Alarm blooming across his face, but John lifted one hand. A subtle motion, quiet but commanding. The waiter froze. He looked at the girl again. Her cheeks were pink from the cold. Her hands, shaking slightly but steady as they cradled her child. And her eyes didn't plead. They didn't manipulate or perform. They simply looked. Tired. Fierce, brave. She wasn't asking for herself. She didn't want his charity. She just needed to feed her baby. John's throat tightened. The candle between them flickered. A single light in a sea of dark wood and whispered conversations. In that moment, Something ancient inside him stirred, something buried deep beneath years of silence and self-preservation. He looked down at the plate, then back at her, and in a voice rough from disuse, he said, "Take it." She didn't pounce, didn't shovel the food into her mouth like someone starving. Instead, she reached into a worn canvas bag and pulled out a square of cloth, clean, though the edges were frayed, and gently, almost reverently, began to wrap the fillet, the mashed potatoes, even the carefully roasted carrots, as if she were preserving treasure instead of leftovers. Then, with a grace that felt sacred, she sank to her knees beside the table and held the baby closer. From her pocket, she produced a small plastic spoon. John didn't breathe. She blew gently on the first spoonful, offered it to the baby, and the moment that food touched his tongue, the child let out a soft, bubbling sound, a gurgle of delight so pure, so uncomplicated, it made something crack inside John's chest. The baby's face lit up, his tiny fists pounding happily against her coat. A smile spread across his cheeks like dawn breaking over a long, frozen night. John looked away, just for a second, tried to blink away the mist clouding his vision. But when he looked back, the girl was still there, still feeding her child spoonful by careful spoonful, as if this was the most important moment in the world. She didn't look around, didn't notice the stares or the whispers. She had eyes only for her son. John's heart twisted in his chest. This wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was something else, something sacred. When the baby finally slowed, his eyes fluttering with fullness and sleep, she packed the remaining food away with quiet efficiency, tucked the spoon into her coat, adjusted the baby's blanket, and stood. She glanced once at John. A simple nod, not of thanks, not of shame, of understanding. Then she turned and walked away. He sat there, unmoving, long after she vanished into the cool night. The candle flickered. The wine grew cold. The empty chair across from him now felt full. Somehow, he didn't decide to follow her. He just did. John followed. Not quickly, not dramatically. There was no cinematic swell of music or thunderclap realization. Just a quiet, steady purpose in his steps. Something in him had stirred, woken from a decade-long sleep, and he couldn't ignore it, even if he didn't understand it yet. The city outside Le Pavone was no longer a distant hum behind soundproofed walls. Now, it was alive. The sidewalk felt colder. The sky looked bigger. The night air cut deeper. He walked a few paces behind her, not wanting to alarm her, but unable to stop. Her pace was brisk, practiced. She moved like someone who had learned to make herself invisible, slipping through cracks in the world most people never even saw. She cradled the baby against her chest, one hand tucked around his head, the other clutching her bag of carefully wrapped leftovers. Her sneakers were falling apart. John noticed it now. The seams frayed, the soles uneven, one shoelace missing. She walked like her shoes hurt her. But stopping wasn't an option. They turned down a narrow side street. Then again, into an alley, dim, lined with old brick buildings and rusted dumpsters. It was the kind of place that would have terrified John once. Not for the danger but for the discomfort. Now, he hardly noticed the grime or the stench. He only saw her. At the end of the alley, there was a parking lot, half abandoned. The asphalt cracked and buckled like old skin. Most of the vehicles were empty husks, long since surrendered to rust and time. But one, a dented navy sedan with mismatched doors and fogged-up windows, stood out. She walked straight to it. The driver's side door creaked open. She didn't hesitate. She climbed into the back seat, settling the baby on a folded blanket that served as a mattress. Then pulled the door closed behind her with a quiet thud. From his distance, John could see her moving inside, adjusting the baby, whispering something, her silhouette barely visible in the faint glow of the street lamp overhead. Then, something unexpected, music. Not from a phone or a speaker. From her. Her voice, soft and trembling, floated out of the cracked window like smoke from a dying fire. A lullaby. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." John stood there, in the dark, transfixed. The baby cooed gently, his tiny fingers gripping the edge of her sweater. The love in that car was bigger than the space it occupied. It spilled out into the cold night air, wrapped itself around John's chest, and pulled something loose. He didn't mean to step forward, but he did. She saw him, startled. She straightened up, eyes narrowing with alarm. John raised both hands. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, softly. "I didn't mean to scare you." "You followed me," she said, no accusation in her tone. Just guarded curiosity. "Yes," John admitted. "I didn't know why. I had to." She didn't move, didn't run. She just stared, evaluating. "I saw how you fed your son," he said. "I've never seen anything like that. I needed to understand." She held the baby a little tighter. Then after a long pause, said, "His name's Noah." John nodded. "Noah. He's 8 months." She added, "He loves mashed potatoes." John said with a half smile. "So did my son." That made her pause. The defensiveness in her shoulders softened. Just slightly. What was his name? "Caleb." She didn't pry, didn't say sorry, just nodded slowly, with a kind of knowing that only those who've lost something irreplaceable carry. "I'm Emily," she said finally. "John." Another pause. He looked at the car, at the blanket, the bag of baby clothes stacked like treasure in the corner. "I could help," he said gently. "A hotel, food, whatever you need." She shook her head. "No. I'm not offering charity," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for money." That surprised him. "Then what do you want?" Emily glanced down at Noah, who had fallen asleep with his cheek pressed to her chest. One tiny hand still curled around a piece of her coat. "Just one day," she said, voice barely a whisper. "One day where he's warm, full, and safe. That's all." Her words hit him harder than any demand ever could have. Not because they were dramatic or poetic, but because they were simple. Honest. "I can do that," John said. "Just one day." She looked at him then, not as a man in a suit. Not as a billionaire, not even as a stranger. Just a man standing in the cold, offering something she hadn't been given in a long time, belief. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply looked back down at Noah and began to hum again. The next morning, the first package appeared. No note, no explanation, just a sealed plastic container. Warm to the touch. Placed neatly on the hood of the navy sedan. Inside, homemade oatmeal with bananas. A baby bottle filled with formula. A folded piece of paper listing nearby free clinics. Emily stared at it for a long time. She didn't eat it right away. Suspicion had been her survival instinct for months. But later, when Noah woke hungry, she warmed it on a portable hot plate and fed him spoonfuls of oatmeal. He smiled. 2 days later, another package. Diapers, wipes, a small jar of Vaseline, and a toy elephant. 3 days later, socks. 2 pairs of new shoes. Both the right size. She never saw who left them. But in the back of her mind, she knew, and quietly, stubbornly, she began to hope. In the beginning, Emily thought the kindness would stop. That it had to. Nothing good in her life had ever lasted longer than a few days. She had learned that people helped you until it stopped being convenient. Until someone told them they shouldn't. Or until they simply forgot. But the small gifts didn't stop. Each morning, just before sunrise, she'd find something new resting quietly on the hood of her old sedan. A pack of pacifiers, a clean, thick baby blanket with tiny moons embroidered in the corner, sealed containers of soup that somehow always stayed warm. A copy of Goodnight Moon with a note scribbled inside the front cover, for Noah. Because every child deserves a bedtime story. Still, nothing extravagant, no cash, no credit card, no pressure, no name. But she knew. John Maxwell. She had seen the way he looked at Noah in that restaurant. Not like a stranger looking at someone else's child. More like a man seeing something familiar. Something painful. Something sacred. Emily had lived long enough on the margins of the city to know that people with wealth didn't usually see people like her. Not really. Not unless they wanted something. But John had left things with care. With intention. With silence. It was unnerving. And it was starting to break through her defenses. Emily had trained herself to avoid attachment. Especially to generosity. She had learned that surviving meant expecting disappointment. But Noah? He was different. He had no such armor. His world was small and innocent. He believed that anyone who fed him must love him. That anyone who smiled must be safe. He reached out for everyone. Trusted too easily. That terrified her. Because she couldn't afford to break in front of him. Couldn't afford for him to one day ask, why didn't they stay? She had to protect him. From the cold. From hunger. And from hope. Because hope was dangerous. 1 week after the night at Le Pavone, something changed. Noah had been unusually fussy all day. He refused his bottle, then his mashed peas. His forehead was warm, and his cheeks flushed pink. Emily checked him again and again, laying cool cloths on his tiny head, singing lullabies in a cracked whisper. But by nightfall, it was clear, he was burning with fever. 104 degrees. His breathing had gone shallow. His eyes, heavy and dull. Panic rose in her throat. Thick and choking. She wrapped him tightly, clutched him to her chest, and ran. The nearest emergency room was 8 blocks away. A hospital she had passed 100 times but never dared to enter. Her heart pounded as she pushed through the sliding glass doors, her voice rising with desperation. He has a fever, he's not responding, please. The receptionist didn't look up right away. When she did, her expression didn't soften. Her fingers didn't pause over the keyboard. Do you have insurance? she asked flatly. Emily hesitated. No, but he's a baby. Please, he needs. We're at full capacity, the woman said, cutting her off. You'll have to wait, or find another facility. Emily blinked. He's burning up. He's not crying anymore, he's too tired to cry. I'm sorry, the woman said, and she didn't sound sorry at all. Without insurance, we can't expedite his case. Emily stumbled outside. The cold bit through her coat like teeth. Her fingers shook. Her breath turned to steam in the air. Noah had gone still in her arms. Too still. She did the only thing she could think to do. She pulled out her cracked, nearly dead phone. Her hands trembled as she typed 2 words. Help us. She didn't even know why she sent it. Didn't know if John would respond, or if it was crazy to even try. But 5 minutes later, headlights swung around the corner, bathing her in light. A black SUV came to a sharp stop in front of the doors. The driver's door opened before the engine stopped. It was him. John. Hair mussed. No coat. His face was wild with urgency. He didn't speak, just held out his arms. Emily didn't hesitate. She placed Noah into them. And something strange happened. Noah didn't cry, didn't squirm. He curled against John's chest, his tiny fingers wrapping weakly around one of John's. Like he recognized him, John cradled the child with unexpected ease. His voice was calm but edged with steel. Inside the hospital, he stormed past the desk without waiting. I need a doctor, he said, not asking, demanding. Right now, this child has a 104-degree fever. And if you let one more minute pass, I swear to God, I will buy this hospital and fire every person in this building who let him suffer. They moved. Doctors rushed forward. Nurses took Noah gently from John's arms and disappeared down the hallway with a crash cart. Alarms beeped. A gurney rolled past. Emily stood frozen, too exhausted to speak. John came back to her, gently placed his coat around her shoulders, sat beside her in the plastic waiting room chair and said nothing. They sat that way for what felt like hours. Finally, a nurse returned. He's stable, she said softly. We've brought the fever down. He'll stay overnight for monitoring. Emily exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding since sunset. Her knees buckled slightly. John caught her elbow, held her steady. You came, she whispered. Of course I did. And before she could stop herself, she leaned into him, chest shaking, breath uneven. Everything she'd been holding in for months pouring out in silent sobs. He didn't flinch, didn't shift away. He just wrapped his arms around her. Not to fix her, not to rescue her, just to hold her. And for the first time since Caleb died, John realized something he hadn't dared admit. Holding someone didn't have to feel like betrayal. The story could have ended there, quietly, privately, like a secret kept between 2 people bound by pain and unexpected grace. But the world had other plans. It started with a photo. Blurry, grainy, snapped by someone outside the emergency room just as John Maxwell exited the hospital with a baby in his arms and a young woman trailing close behind. Within hours, it was everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, Reddit, the tabloids. Tech billionaire's late-night rescue of homeless mother and child. Speculation exploded like wildfire across every platform. Some called it heartwarming. A story of compassion from an unexpected source. Others spun more cynical tales. She's clearly a gold digger. This was staged, probably for PR. What's a man like him doing with a girl like her? Emily's name leaked next, thanks to a hospital intake form that somehow found its way online. Emily Rose Leary, 20 years old, no address listed. What followed was a tidal wave of commentary, cruelty, and confusion. Her social media, what little of it existed, was unearthed, dissected, and dragged. Bloggers speculated on her past. Anonymous trolls posted photos of her baby, debating whether Noah was even John's child. In the apartment John had quietly arranged for her and Noah, Emily sat in the dark, the glow of her phone the only light in the room. Each swipe brought more bile, more judgment, more reasons to close the curtains and never open them again. She turned off the phone. Not because she couldn't handle it, but because Noah didn't deserve that kind of poison near him. He stirred in his crib, soft and warm and blissfully unaware of the storm brewing online. She crossed the room, laid a gentle hand on his chest to soothe him, and whispered, "It's okay, baby, I won't let it touch you." But when John walked in that morning, he knew something had changed. She didn't rise to greet him. She didn't make coffee. She just sat, legs folded under her on the floor, her back against the wall, eyes unfocused. "I can't do this," she said softly, without looking up. "I don't want my son growing up in scandal." John set down the grocery bag in his arms. "Emily, I don't want him seeing those lies one day and wondering if they're true." She continued, her voice dull, tired. "I don't want him growing up wondering if I used you." John knelt in front of her. "You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did Noah. It doesn't matter. People don't care what's true." She looked up at him, her face pale in the morning light. "They already decided who I am." John's jaw tightened. "Then let me tell them," he said. That afternoon, he called his publicist. No statements, no lawyers, no glossy press release written by PR interns. Just one request: a live interview. One camera, one chair, one shot. "I'll speak, not as the CEO. As myself." The next evening, the nation watched as John Maxwell sat down under soft lighting, without a suit, without a script, and told the world everything. Not just about Emily, about Lillian, about Caleb, about the night that took them, the years he spent buried in noise and luxury, pretending it didn't hurt. Pretending he couldn't still hear his son's laugh every time he walked past a toy store or heard a song on the radio. "I stopped living the day they died," he said. "I stopped caring about everything except what I could control. Money, success, routine. It was all a distraction." He paused, breathed in, and then, for the first time publicly, spoke Emily's name. She wasn't asking for charity, he said. She wasn't even asking for help. She just wanted to feed her son. And in doing that, in that moment, she woke something up in me. Something I thought was gone. His voice cracked. He didn't try to hide it. "She didn't take anything from me," he continued. "She gave me something no one else could. A reason to care again. A reason to breathe." He looked directly into the camera, his voice steady and low. "Emily is not a scandal. She is a mother, a warrior. And Noah is not a prop. He's a beautiful boy who deserves a world better than the one we're giving him." The interview wasn't flashy. It didn't have viral stunts or emotional background music. But it was real. And the world listened. The next morning, everything shifted. Bloggers took their hit pieces down. Single mothers flooded the comments with their own stories, of being young and scared and alone and judged. Shelters across the country reported an uptick in donations. A mother in Kansas started a fundraiser called Just One Day. Inspired by Emily's words, nurses shared horror stories of young women turned away at hospitals for lack of insurance. Emily didn't talk to the press. She didn't need to, because the next morning, she showed up at John's door. Noah bundled in her arms, cheeks rosy from the cold. She didn't knock. He opened the door before she could. Her eyes were tired but steady. "I'm not leaving," she said. "If you still want us, we're here." John didn't speak. He stepped aside, held the door open, and for the first time in a very long time, his home, his life, felt full again. John didn't plan for her to stay. He didn't plan anything. He wasn't even sure what this was. This new rhythm that began the moment Emily and Noah stepped through his door. All he knew was, he didn't want them to leave. The apartment he'd rented for them wasn't a penthouse. No sweeping skyline views or marble floors. Just a modest two-bedroom nestled on a quiet street with gray walls, creaky hardwood floors, and windows that caught the morning light like stained glass. Emily moved in with nothing but 2 duffel bags, a baby carrier, and a kind of weariness that settled into a place before she did. But within a week, that apartment began to change. A drawing from Noah, all scribbles and colors, taped proudly on the fridge. A faint scent of baby lotion lingering in the hallway. Socks, tiny, mismatched, draped over the heater to dry. Laughter, soft and sudden, breaking the stillness at odd hours. They didn't talk about what they were. There were no labels, no declarations, no carefully worded speeches. They just were. Every morning, John showed up. At first, it was under the pretense of dropping off groceries or checking in on Noah's health. But soon, it became a ritual. He'd knock, let himself in, and Noah would squeal in delight, tiny feet bouncing in his crib. Arms outstretched like he'd been waiting for this exact moment all night. Emily would be at the stove, hair pulled into that same messy knot. Her eyes still sleep-soft but smiling. Coffee would already be brewing. They fell into a rhythm so gentle it surprised them both. John learned how to make a bottle just the right temperature, how to warm baby food without nuking it, how to change a diaper without crying, or making the baby cry. Which was harder than it looked. He memorized Noah's sounds, the low hum he made when he was tired, the way his nose wrinkled when he didn't like the peas, the giggle that exploded out of him like a bell when you blew raspberries on his belly. Emily noticed, too. She watched the way John held Noah now, not stiff or cautious like he had at first, but naturally, with a kind of quiet care that couldn't be faked. He never tried to impress, never pushed. He simply showed up, day after day, not to fix her, not to own her story, just to be in it. One night, after Noah had finally fallen asleep, his soft baby snores audible through the monitor, John and Emily sat on the small balcony. legs tucked under a shared blanket. The city stretched before them, distant and glowing. Neither of them looked at it. They were too caught up in the quiet between them. I used to think love had to be big, Emily said softly, like fireworks and dramatic speeches, the kind of love they write books about. John smiled faintly. And now? She shrugged. Now, I think it's more like this. Someone bringing coffee, listening to the same story about your kid 5 times in a row. Sitting next to you when the world feels too loud. John turned toward her. His eyes, so often unreadable, were suddenly wide open. When I lost Lillian and Caleb, he said, I thought that part of me, whatever part could care that deeply, was dead. He paused, his voice cracking ever so slightly. But it wasn't, Emily said gently. It just waited. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't need to. There are some moments more intimate than touch. The kind of moment when silence says everything. When two people realize they are no longer drifting alone. Weeks passed. John stopped bringing groceries. He started bringing himself. He'd show up with Noah's favorite snacks. Help fold laundry. Sing lullabies, badly, just to hear Emily laugh. Sometimes he stayed the night. Though never in her bed. He'd sleep on the couch. Noah nestled on his chest. Both of them rising and falling with the same rhythm. It wasn't a romance built on whirlwind moments. It was built on repetition, on choice, on presence. And then, one afternoon, an envelope arrived. It was plain, white, no return address, slipped beneath the door like a whisper. Emily picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling before she even knew why. Inside, a letter, handwritten, tight, neat cursive, from her mother. If there's still a chance to know my grandson, I'd like to try. That was it. No apologies, no long explanations, just one line. Emily sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. The letter curled in her hands like it was made of glass. Noah played at her feet, babbling happily with a stack of soft blocks. When John came by that evening, he found her in the same spot. She wrote, Emily said quietly. He picked up the letter. Read it, said nothing. What are you thinking? He asked. I don't know, she said honestly. It's been almost 2 years since they told me I was no longer their daughter. Since they turned their backs on me. You don't owe them anything, he said. Emily looked at Noah, who had crawled into her lap without a care in the world. But doesn't he deserve to know where he comes from? She whispered. Even if it's broken? John was quiet for a long time before he finally replied. Don't let him grow up with the same emptiness you had. He said, let him have the chance to forgive, or not. But let it be his choice. 3 days later, they drove to the sleepy town Emily once called home. A gravel driveway, white paint peeling from an old farmhouse. A porch swing swaying in the wind like a memory. Emily stood frozen at the base of the steps. Noah on her hip. John hovered behind, not crowding her, just being there. The front door creaked open. Her mother stepped out, older, smaller somehow. Her eyes landed on Noah and filled with tears. I was scared, she said softly, of what people would think. Of losing the version of you I thought I raised. And I lost you anyway. Emily didn't speak. Her father appeared behind her mother. Weathered hands clasped nervously. He looked at Noah like he was seeing something holy. Noah reached out, his tiny hand grabbing the air with innocent curiosity. "May I?" her mother asked, her voice shaking. "May I hold him?" Emily hesitated. Then slowly, carefully, she placed Noah into her mother's arms. The older woman broke into tears, holding the child like she was trying to catch every moment she'd missed. And in that moment, something shifted. Not everything, not perfectly, but enough. Inside that small farmhouse, memories clung to the walls like faded wallpaper. The kitchen hadn't changed, same dented fridge, same hand-me-down table Emily used to do homework on before everything turned upside down. Her mother busied herself with the kettle, her hands trembling slightly as she poured hot water into chipped mugs. Her father, quiet but present, bounced Noah gently on his knee as the little boy giggled, fascinated by the man's glasses. Noah didn't know this was supposed to be tense. He didn't know about the time his grandparents turned their backs on Emily. He didn't know about slammed doors or words that couldn't be taken back. He just knew warm hands and soft voices. That was enough for him. Emily watched all of it, her son laughing in the arms of the people who had once disowned her, and felt a strange mix of emotions twist through her chest. Gratitude, anger, sadness, hope. Her mother sat across from her, stirring tea that had long since cooled. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she said after a while, her voice rough with regret. "We raised you with expectations. When you got pregnant, I thought if I held the line, if I didn't bend, you'd come back to who you were. I didn't go anywhere," Emily said. Her voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. You just stopped seeing me." Her mother nodded, tears lining her lashes. "I know. I'm sorry, Emily. I know it doesn't fix anything. But I'm sorry." And somehow, it didn't feel like an excuse. It didn't feel like a manipulation. It just felt real. Emily didn't respond right away. She looked at Noah again, his cheeks glowing, his smile wide. "I'm not asking for a full reunion," her mother added, "just a chance. To know him. To know you again. If you'll let me." John sat quietly to the side, not interfering, not inserting himself, just watching, witnessing. When Emily finally stood up and walked around the table to hug her mother, it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect. But it was something. They stayed the afternoon, laughed, even. Her father pulled out an old photo album, flipping through pages of Emily's childhood, her school portraits, her drawings, even an old handmade card that read, "Happy Birthday, Daddy," in crayon. John watched as she held Noah in her lap and pointed to a picture of herself at 5 years old. Toothless grin and pigtails flying. "That's me," she whispered. Noah clapped like she'd revealed a magic trick. Later, as the sun began to dip and the porch was washed in a warm amber glow, Emily and her mother stood outside together, watching John strap Noah into his car seat. "Is he good to you?" her mother asked cautiously. Emily nodded. "He's better than I knew was possible." Her mother gave a small, sad smile. "I'm glad. You deserve something kind." And for the first time, Emily believed her. As they drove back to the city, Noah snored gently in the back seat. Emily stared out the window in thoughtful silence. The trees blurred past. Her reflection in the glass looked different somehow, older. Yes, but not in a tired way. In a rooted way. like someone coming home from a long journey, even if they weren't sure where home was yet. John glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, actually, yeah, I am." There was a long pause before she added, "Thank you. You don't have to thank me." "I do," she insisted. "You didn't push. You didn't tell me what to feel. You just stood next to me." John smiled faintly. "That's all I ever want to do." A year passed. The noise faded. The headlines dried up. People moved on, as they always do, and in their place came something Emily had never experienced before. Stillness, safety, stability. She started classes again, night school for nursing. John watched Noah on her class nights, happily reading bedtime stories and feeding him diced sweet potatoes as the toddler launched half of them at the floor. They began to share more of their lives, routines folding into one another. Grocery shopping, movie nights, messy breakfasts, diaper disasters, no labels, no rush, just life. It was on a crisp spring afternoon that they found themselves at the same park where everything had changed. The breeze rustled through the leaves. Children squealed in the distance. Sunlight dripped through the trees like gold. They weren't here for a walk. They were here for something else. At the far end of the open field stood a simple wooden arch wrapped in ivy and pale blue ribbon. A white cloth was spread on the grass, flanked by a handful of chairs filled with the few people who mattered. And at the center of it all, Noah, nearly 2 years old now, standing wobbly in a navy vest and matching bow tie, a tiny velvet ring box clutched in his chubby hands. He toddled across the grass, giggling, and delivered it to John, who knelt, smiling, to receive it. He looked up. Emily stood barefoot in a white dress, simple and soft, her hair loose around her shoulders. She wasn't glowing because of the sunlight. She was glowing because she survived, and finally knew it. John rose to his feet, box in hand, and dropped to one knee. The breeze stilled. The city hushed. "You didn't ask for anything," he said quietly. "You didn't beg. You didn't expect. You just showed up, on the worst night of your life, and gave me something I thought I'd never feel again." He opened the box, revealing a ring, elegant and simple, chosen not for the size of its stone, but for the way it would look when she held their son's hand. "You didn't take my leftovers, Emily," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing." He paused, blinking back tears. "You gave me family. You gave me love. You gave me a future." His voice caught one last time. "Will you marry me?" Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Her knees buckled, but she was laughing, through the tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, yes, yes." They embraced, folding into each other like they were made of matching pieces. And as the officiant began the short ceremony, Noah clapped again, his own little approval written all over his wide, joyful face. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. At first, Emily thought it was just a fluke. The kindness, the gifts, the quiet gestures that showed up without warning and disappeared without demand. She told herself, this won't last. It never did. Nothing in her life ever stuck around unless it came with strings. With guilt. With expectations that slowly suffocated her. But then another morning came. And another. And still, there it was, something new. Something small, left like a secret on the hood of her old sedan. A pack of pacifiers still sealed in plastic. A thick baby blanket, soft, clean, with tiny embroidered moons in each corner. Soup in a thermos, still warm somehow, wrapped in a towel like someone had wanted it to stay that way for her. And once, a copy of Goodnight Moon. A note inside scribbled in simple, familiar handwriting. For Noah, because every child deserves a bedtime story. No envelope, no name, no fanfare, but she knew exactly who it was. John Maxwell, the man from Le Pavone. The billionaire who didn't flinch when she asked for his leftovers. The one who didn't stare like the others did. Didn't judge. Didn't try to pretend she wasn't there. Who handed her food not out of pity, but out of something deeper. Something quieter. Recognition. He had seen her, not just with his eyes. With something else. Something broken in him that mirrored what was broken in her. And now, he was still seeing her. That was what scared her the most. Emily had lived long enough on the edges of the world to know what usually followed kindness. Obligation, strings, disappointment. People helped until it got uncomfortable. Until someone warned them not to. Until they forgot you existed. But not this time. The gifts kept coming. Each morning, just before dawn, before the city even yawned awake. She'd find a new package. Never flashy, never excessive, just intentional, gentle, real. A pack of baby wipes. A new bottle brush. Tiny socks that actually fit Noah's always growing feet. Still, no name, no knock at her window. No, look at what I did, moment. Just presence, unspoken but deeply felt. It shook her. She didn't want to trust it. Didn't want to trust him. Because trust meant vulnerability. And vulnerability, especially with a child in your arms, was a risk she couldn't afford. But the way he gave, it was different. It wasn't performative. It wasn't transactional. It was steady. And slowly, it chipped away at the walls she'd spent months, maybe years, building. Noah, though, didn't need convincing. He had no concept of defense. No radar for pretense or danger. His world was built on instinct. On warmth and cold. On smiles and silence. On the arms that fed him and the voice that sang him to sleep. So when someone brought soup or a new toy elephant, to him it simply meant, someone cares. He believed every good thing was here to stay. And that terrified Emily. Because she knew better. She knew that people left. She knew that love came with fine print. She knew that hope, when it shattered, cut the deepest. So she watched him closely. She guarded his heart like it was a fortress under siege. Because one day, he might ask, why didn't they stay, Mom? And she needed to be able to say, because I wouldn't let them hurt you. But then came the night everything changed. It started like any other difficult day. Noah was cranky, restless. He refused his bottle, then refused his peas. His cheeks were flushed, his forehead warm. Emily placed her hand against his skin and felt the slow rise of heat like a pot about to boil. By nightfall, he was burning up, not warm, scorching. She checked his temperature again, 104. The number screamed at her from the screen like a siren. His breathing had gone shallow. His cries were softer now. Weaker. As if even crying took too much effort. Panic hit her in the chest like a truck. No time to think. No time to weigh options. She grabbed a blanket, wrapped him tight, and ran. The hospital was 8 blocks away. 8 blocks of cold wind, of passing headlights, of 100 strangers who didn't stop to ask why a young woman was sprinting down the street with a baby pressed to her chest like a lifeline. She burst through the emergency room doors, gasping, half carrying, half dragging herself to the reception desk. "He's burning up, he's not responding, please." The woman behind the desk didn't even flinch. Didn't look up right away. When she did, her voice was flat. Her fingers kept tapping across the keyboard. "Do you have insurance?" Emily blinked, stunned. "No, but he's a baby. He's got a 104 fever. Please, we're at full capacity," the woman said, not a trace of compassion in her voice. "You'll need to wait, or find another facility." Her mouth fell open. "He's not crying anymore," she whispered. "He's too tired to cry." "I'm sorry," the woman replied again, except she wasn't. Not really. Emily stumbled outside. The cold wrapped around her like a noose. Her coat was thin, useless. Her knees buckled beneath the weight of fear and failure and exhaustion. Noah had gone quiet in her arms. Too quiet. She looked at his face, flushed. Damp. Limp. A sound escaped her throat. Somewhere between a sob and a scream. She fumbled for her phone. Cracked screen. 1 bar of battery. The last shred of hope flickering between her fingers. She typed 2 words. "Help us," and hit send. She didn't know if he'd come. Didn't know if he saw her as a burden now. Or if maybe she was wrong to trust anyone at all. But 6 minutes later, a black SUV screeched to a halt at the curb. Headlights flooding the sidewalk with light. The door swung open before the engine even stopped. John. No coat. Hair disheveled. Eyes frantic. He didn't say anything, just held out his arms. Emily didn't hesitate. She placed Noah into them. And then something happened that she would never forget. Noah didn't resist. Didn't cry. He just curled into John's chest like it was something he'd known his whole life. His tiny hand reached up. Fingers brushing John's collar. His breath was ragged, but his body softened in that embrace. Like he recognized him. John's voice was calm, but there was fire beneath it. Steel. He turned on his heel and walked back into the hospital like a storm. Inside, he didn't wait, didn't sign in. "I need a doctor. Now." His voice boomed, clear and cold. "This baby has a 104-degree fever. If 1 more second passes without help, I swear to God, I will buy this hospital and fire every single one of you." They moved. Doctors came running. Nurses rushed forward. One woman took Noah from John's arms with practiced hands and vanished down the hallway. Alarms beeped. A stretcher rolled past. Emily stood frozen, unable to breathe. John came back. He draped his coat over her shoulders, warm, heavy, still scented with cologne and something strangely comforting. Then he sat beside her in a blue plastic chair. He didn't say a word. And he didn't leave. Hours passed. Finally, a nurse returned, her voice soft and steady. "He's stable. The fever's come down. We'll keep him overnight, just to be safe." Emily exhaled, hard, like her lungs had been holding that breath since sunset. Her legs gave out slightly. John caught her elbow. his grip steady. "You came," she whispered, the words trembling off her lips. He didn't say "you're welcome." Didn't say "of course" like it was obvious. He just nodded. "Yeah, I came." And without thinking, without permission from the walls she had built, she collapsed into him. Chest shaking, shoulders trembling, everything she'd been holding in for months breaking free in a flood of silent sobs. And John? He didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't say a single word. He just held her, not to save her, not to fix her, but to be there, to remind her, in the most human way, that she wasn't alone anymore. And for John, that moment was a revelation. Because for the first time in a decade, holding someone didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like beginning again. The news didn't wait. Before dawn, someone at the hospital had taken a photo, John Maxwell, cradling a baby in the emergency room lobby. A young woman curled beside him, wrapped in his coat. And within hours, the internet exploded. Tech billionaire's mysterious night at sparks questions. Who is the woman with John Maxwell? Power, privilege, and the girl who came from nothing. Her name surfaced first, Emily Leary. Then came the speculations, the think pieces, the viral TikToks. People dissected her past, her photos, her silence. They questioned her motives, called her every name you can imagine. The love story was too inconvenient, too quiet, too real for the internet's appetite for scandal. Some people praised her, others ripped her apart. Even Noah, barely a year old, wasn't spared from public scrutiny. His face was posted in forums. His smile was captioned and debated. They didn't care that he was a child. Not really. And Emily? She shut down. She couldn't look at her phone anymore. Couldn't open her messages or browse social media without seeing strangers theorizing her life like it was an episode of reality TV. "I don't want him to grow up like this," she said one morning, her voice brittle as glass. "I don't want him to read lies one day and wonder if they're true." John sat on the edge of the couch beside her, still holding his morning coffee. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said softly. "Neither did Noah." She nodded slowly. "It doesn't matter. People believe what they want to believe." He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, "Then let me tell them the truth." The next evening, John went live on national television. No press release, no handlers, no rehearsed lines. Just him, sitting in a chair beneath soft studio lights. Eyes locked on the camera. And this time, he didn't talk about his company. He didn't defend his wealth. He didn't try to justify his choices. He talked about Caleb, about Lillian, about the crash that took them. He talked about the years of silence that followed. About the emptiness of boardrooms and award dinners and million-dollar investments. About the numbness that clung to everything he touched. "I stopped being a person," he said. "I became a routine, a shell." Then he spoke of Emily. He told them how he met her. How she asked for his leftovers, not for herself, but for her son. How that simple act shattered a wall in him that he didn't even realize was still standing. She didn't want a handout, he said. She wasn't chasing attention. She just wanted her baby to eat. And then he paused, just for a moment. "She didn't take anything from me," he continued. "She gave me something I didn't even know I was missing, a reason to care again. A reason to live." He looked directly into the camera. She is not a headline. She is not a scam. She is a mother. And Noah is a little boy who deserves to grow up in peace, without the weight of strangers' opinions crushing his future. The broadcast lasted just under 20 minutes. But the effect? Massive. The internet, unpredictable as it was, shifted. Mothers from around the world began posting stories about their own struggles, teen pregnancies, hospital bills, nights sleeping in cars with babies clutched to their chests. Emily became a quiet symbol, not of scandal, but of survival. Shelters and outreach programs received a spike in donations. A group of nurses launched an initiative to help uninsured mothers receive emergency care without delay. Hashtags like #OneWarmDay and #ForNoah trended globally. Emily didn't speak to the press. She didn't need to, because this time, the world saw her not as a story, but as a person. And then, one morning, she showed up at John's door again. She didn't knock. She didn't wait. He opened it before she could lift her hand. Noah was bundled in a navy jacket, his cheeks pink from the cold, eyes wide and curious. Emily looked up, her voice quiet, but clear. "We're not leaving. If you still want us, we're here." John didn't reply. He didn't need to. He stepped aside. And for the first time in his life, not as a CEO, not as a widower, not as a man with a tragic past, but as John. He welcomed his future in through the front door. They didn't rush anything. Emily moved into the house slowly. Not all at once. Not like a woman swept off her feet, but like a mother carefully testing a floorboard before letting her son walk across it. The space filled with signs of life quickly. Crayons on the counter. Finger paint masterpieces taped to the fridge. A trail of nose-stuffed animals forming a kind of breadcrumb path from one room to the next. John started getting up earlier. Not for meetings. For morning giggles. For the sound of nose feet thudding down the hallway. For Emily's soft humming as she made pancakes in her pajamas. Her hair tied up in the same messy bun she wore the first night they met. They still didn't talk much about what they were. They didn't need to. Love had stopped being a conversation. It had become a routine. A rhythm. And then, 1 year after the night everything changed. They returned to the park where it all began. No photographers. No reporters. Just a white cloth under an old oak tree. A few friends. A scattering of wildflowers. And Noah, now 2. Dressed in a tiny navy vest. His little bow tie crooked. Walking across the grass with the ring box in his chubby hands. John knelt to take it from him. Then stood to face Emily, barefoot in a simple white dress. Her eyes brighter than the sky behind her. He looked at her with a reverence that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with knowing. "You didn't take my leftovers," he whispered. "You gave me everything I didn't know I was missing." Her hands shook as she reached for his. "Yes," she said, before he even asked. "Yes." And as the officiant began the vows, Noah waddled up to John, wrapped his arms around his leg, and said clearly, joyfully, "Daddy." The entire park stilled. John bent down, scooped him up, and held both of them, Emily and Noah, in one long, quiet embrace. "I love you, son," he whispered. And just like that, the story that began with a question at a table of silence, ended with a family. Not perfect, not planned, but whole. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of love, second chances, or the quiet miracles that change everything, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is Soul Stirring Stories, where every story reminds you that the greatest kindnesses are often the smallest, and that sometimes the leftovers are the beginning of something sacred.